Hey Gearheads, and welcome to GT Garage Talk, a discussion about all things automotive. I am your host, Cory, and on this week's episode, we have a lot to talk about. We dance a little bit all over the place, from auto shows to fun cars to vehicle design to parts shortages and just the industry as a whole. Bringing back a longtime listener of the show, fan of the show, multiple returning time guest of the show, the one, the only vehicle nanny himself, Bill Taylor. He does an amazing job giving us insight here on the channel that we cannot get anywhere else. Being a longtime General Motors employee, he has a unique and different approach to the industry because he was in it for so long, and continues that passion through his outlet Vehicle Nanny, where he stokes that fire of vehicle passion in the next generation of gearheads out there in the world. We thank him for that. He also guest lectures at a local university, and just a lot of really cool insight from Bill. So I won't ramble. Let's bring Bill on. Bill, so great to have you back. We've been chatting a little bit so far, but welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you. And I've just been following you like crazy. It seems like you are on every medium out there except for newspaper.
You know, the idea has crossed my mind to reach out to the local newspaper just to pad my numbers a little bit, but recently, according to my dad, who canceled his subscription after forever, they've dropped to like a 3 a week delivery schedule now. So I'm like, I don't even think that would help pad my numbers at this point. I'm just going to
No.
keep pushing in the digital realm and let print do what print do.
Well, I had been subscribing to Car and Driver for a couple of
Mm,
years, and I've loved it, since the 70s when I was first driving.
mm-hmm.
And it's, now they're starting to combine a couple of months, and it's getting thinner, and you can't find them in stores. It's only by mail. So you can kind of see it withering away, even
Yeah.
though still great content, but
Yeah.
limited.
I, it was very fun. In some conversations I've had with Mike Satterfield, the gentleman racer, I asked him at one point, because he kind of dabbles. Well, he doesn't kind of dabble. He does play in the print arena with the gentleman racer. And I asked him, I said, at what point does print become that kind of chic vinyl record type? Everybody seeks out that. And his reply was, it already has. And I was kind of like, yes and no. Like, it is really cool to see your stuff in print, especially photography.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know yet. And maybe that's just maybe a misunderstanding on my part of how cool vinyl is right now. The fact that I describe it as cool may also date me. So who knows? Who knows?
I don't think so. And, there's a couple of magazines like Road and Track went to, a very artistic
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
magazine. I think it's only 6 times a year now, or maybe even less, almost coffee table
mm-hmm,
worthy.
mm-hmm.
And then Haggerty has a Drivers Club magazine that
Yes.
I subscribe to, even though I don't currently have a car insured with them. It's, I mean, phenomenal artwork, really great articles, and that one's worthy. And I have a hard time recycling that one. I've got a stack of them in my drawer.
Well, I've shared it before on the podcast here, but I have a very strong affinity for car magazines because at one point in my life, before finding a wife, I had maybe a decade's worth of both Car and Driver and Motor Trend that I just got rid of. And now it eats at my soul. I'm like, I have an attic. They could just be up there, not bothering anyone. And like, I started with the 1999 Camaro SS versus SVT Mustang Cobra versus the blue and white Pontiac Trans Am.
Okay.
And that was like the first, and I could still picture the cover and everything of that Car and Driver. And from then on, for nearly a decade, if not more, I had every issue and I had them in order in bookshelves in my room.
Nice.
And it's kind of sad that I don't have that anymore. There was some a lot of brands did a lot of interesting things in that time frame, and
Oh, no doubt.
to not have record of that kind of makes me a little sad. Like the weirdest one that pops to mind was the Pontiac Grand Am SCT. Do you remember that? You were probably with the company at the time.
Of course, yeah.
So, four door Pontiac Grand Am, but it had four Recaro racing buckets in it. I can't remember what they did to the engine. I had a Pontiac Grand Am four door at one point in my life, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to make an SCT out of this. Never did.
That was, you know, I started at Chevrolet in 1984, and we had to get special permission to buy another GM product
Oh,
if it
wow.
wasn't Chevrolet.
Wow.
And same for the others, because the general managers back then were compensated by the number of VINs they sold.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you bought the Pontiac guy's product, it was bad. So I, through a roundabout way, bought a new 86 Pontiac two-door Grand Am
Mm-hmm.
because I loved the red gauges at night,
Mm-hmm.
which was the Pontiac thing back in the 80s.
Yep.
And
And they
silly, I
compared
didn't care about the car, I just loved that instrument panel.
and they carried on until the brand's demise, which I've brought this up with others on the podcast, but could you imagine what a Pontiac Dodge revival or rivalry would look like at this stage? Like, because Pontiac positioned themselves as the excitement division, and they really were. The
Right. Oh,
Firebird
yeah.
was way more cool and just out there than the Camaro was. You had the GTO, which some say was lame and some say was the coolest vehicle that Pontiac made in the modern era. You had a lot of fun stuff going on there. And yes, the Aztec and stuff like that. But
Hey,
it,
I had an Aztec and loved it.
I had a friend that had one and she loved it as well. And they were cool and fun and quirky and they earned their place. Speaking of car and driver, just this morning I read an article of 10 or 20 cars their editors wish were not discontinued. And sure enough, Pontiac Aztec was on the list.
See, it was
So,
ahead of its time, Corey.
yeah, it really was.
It was
And
the original Overlander,
hmm
and if you look at it, and I did an article on this maybe a year ago, and I called it the Angry Toaster because that's what Bob Lutz referred to it as when he came to GM, but it had an interior that was really cool and
hmm
functional, and heck, it had a cooler as a center console, a
a
removable
removable
cooler.
cooler. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of Pontiac Aztec love on this this podcast. As much as
There you
I
go.
can pretend to ignore it, yes. So you wrap all that up, and that's not to say very modern Dodge hasn't had some missteps. I mean, the Journey, while it was a good, capable three-row crossover, wasn't Dodge exciting like we know them right now. They've I think there was that Magnum, I believe they had. They had a few kind of misses, but as we know their lineup now, Charger, Challenger, and Durango. Can you imagine a Pontiac lineup to go head to head with that? With just, mm, I would
Oh,
love
yeah.
to have seen it, and what could have been if things had gone a little bit differently in 2008. That's just, yes. Anyway.
I agree. No, I agree. There's all kinds of interesting things, and Dodge has taken some chances, which I respect. And
hmm
like the Magnum could have been a runaway hit. I think in some circles it was. Pontiac, whether it's the Aztec or a number of other things, I just love it when an automaker, especially one that's kind of a mass market automaker, takes a chance.
hmm Absolutely. And
And I tend to gravitate toward the quirky. So usually when I go, "Hey, that's a great car," that's usually a sign it's not going to do well with sales, but it's going to be a great car for Bill to drive.
yes, yes. Uh, which, okay, speaking of automakers taking chances,
Yes.
this is like I did not see this one coming at all, and it's been interesting to watch. But you have a traditionally very conservative automaker in Toyota say, like, at one, you can almost see in their product line development, somebody said, okay, we're no longer going to be the appliance brand. We're no longer just going to be reliable. I'm staring at a picture of the Solar Octane Orange 2022 Tundra TRD Pro that they brought me. that thing is anything but conservative. It is bold, it
Yeah,
is brash, it is in your face, and it's like Toyota 5, 10 years ago would never have made something like that. And it's very interesting to see when there is a big shift in automakers that say, all right, here's where we were, here's where, and they don't even quote unquote need to have done it. They have been resting I don't want to say resting on their laurels. That implies complacency, but they could have rested on their reliability
right.
laurels and just kept making good, practical, run of the mill vehicles. But now I drove a TRD Camry, for crying out loud. There's the Toyota in my garage right now is lime green. What's going on at that brand?
Well, and not only that with the trucks, but look what they're doing with cars still, whether it's that Camry,
Mhm.
the GR86,
Ugh.
which let's face it is a Subaru, but
Mhm.
I'm okay with that.
And I love
And
that
then
car.
the GR Corolla, are you
Hmm.
kidding me? Over
Hmm.
300 horsepower from a three-cylinder engine? Would you have ever predicted that?
Never. Not from anyone, especially not Toyota, because
Right,
again, like they were the reliable, the go-to, hey, I just need a good car to run 300,000 miles or more, go buy a
right.
Toyota. And now it's like I want something fun and reliable and last 300,000 miles. Well, go buy a Toyota. So it's yes, it's very interesting to see the evolution of automakers and what they do, what they're bringing to the table. You know, I there's so much interesting stuff going on. The push for electrification is changing things a little bit, and other brands are stepping out in front of others. And you've got General Motors basically waging war on Tesla, saying we are going to be the leaders. And that kind of leads into a topic you and I were planning on at least touching on here in this episode, and that is Detroit Auto Show, Texas, State Fair, Texas, and the auto show there. You saw the new Equinox. You've seen the new Blazer. You and I both have strong opinions on the Blazer. But what are your feelings with? Do you think that new Equinox EV has what it takes to dethrone Tesla in sales volume when you've got a mainstream automaker making something quote unquote starting price 30,000 or under 30,000? It'll probably be 29,995 for a model that nobody has on their floor. But
I do. Matter of fact, I think that's brilliant because up until then, I really felt GM had abandoned the affordable vehicle segments,
mm-hmm,
which is why Maverick has been so successful, especially a hybrid Maverick if you could get one.
yes.
But I do think that they can do that. I mean, they cut the price on the Bolt and the Bolt
Hmm.
EUV for, I mean, I think they had to,
Right.
but um, those who've driven them, and I haven't, but say they're perfectly great cars
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
the normal consumer who needs a vehicle to get around. For us, I'm not, I don't like to use the word retired because I don't think I've stopped, but
Right.
it's a different, it's actually rewired,
There you
not
go.
retired.
There you go. I appreciate that.
And, and, my wife is much the same. We would be an ideal electric car family, at least one car
Right.
electric. But I think Equinox perfect. And let's face it, where Tesla really falls short, and I see all the comments, seems to be build quality
Hmm.
and service after the sale.
Yep. And
And this is where GM will shine. And I remember one of the first podcasts I was on with you and Matt, where we were talking about, what would be GM's competitive advantage. I said, it's the dealer network.
hmm. Hmm.
You've got 4,200 outlets that could service an electric vehicle. Hello, Tesla. Where's your service center at?
Yep. And that cannot be discounted. I know dealers are being portrayed in the poorest of lights in the current market because it seems every video I upload, I only report MSRP on any dealer loan that I've got. It is up to the dealer to market and sell the vehicles however they will. I'm not going to blast them for putting a markup on their vehicles because they know their product, they know what they've got, they know the bills that they have to pay, and they know how many vehicles they're turning every month and how many they can expect to come in to turn next month.
Right.
So there's still a whole business side of things, and the free market being what it is, when supply catches back up to demand, we're going to see a big shift. You've got brands like Ford adamantly pushing back on their dealer networks so that their brand reputation does not suffer in the midst of it. But it's a very interesting time to be in the dealer world for sure. But I don't even know where I got on this rant. But I just feel like so often dealers get blasted, maybe sometimes fairly, because I know like every once in a while there will be a 60 grand markup on a Corvette Z06, and that's
Yeah.
outrageous. Like,
Yeah.
I get it. You've got a super rare product, but at the same point, like, it's not doing anybody any good sitting on your showroom floor. Like, you want people out driving those. At the same time, I know of small dealers that have employees that they had to pay and mouths that had to be fed and bills that need to be covered, and they're only getting, you know, 50% of the vehicles they were making in their heyday, and they've got to make do and adjustments. So I see both
You
sides of
know,
it, but yeah.
yeah, the market will take care of that, and look at how things are starting to shift as, now supply chain's starting to, inch its way forward,
Yeah.
but at the same time, rates are up. So now you're starting to see a couple of cars sit on dealer lots. Not a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not where it was pre-pandemic, but I don't I have real mixed feelings about beating up on a dealer over the markup
Mm-hmm.
thing. As a consumer, I choose not to participate.
Yes.
And guess what I also do? I remember who those dealers were.
Yep.
And I think that customers have short memories sometimes, but I also know that these times are very fleeting, and nobody seems to complain when the dealer's forced to discount vehicles,
Right. Right. It's
right? So I say let the market dictate that. I do not know how Ford is going to control that. When I was with Saturn and we finally started getting some good product in '06, '07, especially with the Sky,
mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
had some Saturn retailers trying to mark it up. And most of the network said, "Hey, don't do that to the brand. We just built the brand." And our general manager was really great because GM Legal was all over saying, "Don't go down this path of
Right.
talking them in this big setting." And she just kind of put it out there, said, "We've built this brand. This is not what we're about." She goes, "I really would hate to see a retailer not get some new product because of bad behavior." And that's all she had to say. She didn't say it was going to happen. And all of a sudden, the room just went quiet. It was next subject. So it these things have a way of working themselves out is the point I'm trying to make.
Yep.
And it's it's frustrating,
Yep.
but if you've got the money to pay 60 grand over sticker for a Z06,
And you just want to
okay.
be the first one driving one in your neighborhood? Go for it.
If that's important to you in life, okay, I guess. Good for you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, not the world I live in, but if it works for you, go on and do it because again, the free market being what it is, and we're dangerously getting into political topics here, but uh, if nobody will pay it, nobody will have to pay it, and as
right.
long as they're still getting what they deem the return on their markup is, they'll keep doing it. And yes, it will all even out for sure. The funny
Yeah.
thing to me is, bless their hearts, the Blue Oval Company is having trouble getting blue ovals
Oh,
now. Not so
no.
much chips. So they've got lots and lots and lots of trucks sitting out there that people are spying from satellite imagery, and it's all because they're missing blue ovals on the front. And
Right.
that's odd to me. Like, how do
Well,
you run out of your
it
logo?
Well, it's interesting, and I, obviously have a lot of friends in the industry, and I have one that, is connected with the company in Michigan that makes it, the single source that makes those
Mm,
blue ovals, by the
mm,
way, and they ran into a little bit of trouble because they were dumping some carcinogenics into the local river,
Mm,
and that's why they had to slow down their production
yeah.
because they had a little cleanup to take care of.
Yeah. My goodness. When things stress the industry, you start to see all the other cracks everywhere else. So the first domino to fall was obviously coronavirus and the lockdowns, and then that created the reallocation of chips and all that stuff, and that created a shortage, which then created reallocation and shortages, it, from a business case perspective, like I'm going back to my college business classes and I'm like, man, this sure would be fun to study 10, 20 years from now and just see how it all played out, from 20,000 feet above, and just see how this led to this, how this led to that. And I don't know,
It's
very, very interesting stuff.
Well, it's everything that's happened the last couple of years with shortages, it's caused dealers to market vehicles differently.
Hmm.
It's finally pushed them into doing more online retailing, not necessarily from beginning to end, but certainly from right thick in the middle of the shopping
Hmm.
process. And one of the things that I enjoy doing is, and we'll probably touch on this, um, I guess lecture at Northwood University.
Yep.
They have a really wonderful automotive marketing and management class, and a lot of the students there come from dealership families who are trying to learn more about the business before they go back to that. Or there are others who just want to get into that side of the business. And as I talk to them about digital marketing and or just the history of automotive,
Hmm.
you look at all that's happened in the last couple of years. I said, you are all on the cusp of some very interesting and fast changes in automotive.
Hmm.
And I think they get it, but I don't know that they really understood the magnitude of what they were watching unfold in front of them.
Yeah.
And it makes for some really lively discussions, which obviously I love to
Right.
death, but it's very fascinating to see everything that's changing. These are things, behaviors we wanted dealers to change 10 years ago when I was pushing digital marketing with the GM dealers.
Yeah.
And they had it too good. They didn't need it. Now they need it, and they're like, "Where was that tool again?"
Yeah, it is very interesting. And, I'm pushing 36. And just to see, since I really got into cars, how everything has changed, how brands go to market. I remember, like, it was huge news. It was everything GM could push out, gmbuypower.com, which was
Yeah.
like the first online build and price. That was like
Yep.
the thing. Now everybody's got their own build and price. I don't even know what happens if you go to gmbuypower.com anymore, if it even still exists and redirects you somewhere.
I'm sure it redirects.
Yeah, but I spent so much time on that website building my dream Camaro and optioning this and that and this and that, and what happens if you do this and what happens if you do that. And now everybody's got one, to varying degrees of success. I will say, as much as I love the brand overall, Kia's is probably my least favorite because it is not very intuitive in how it
Hmm.
operates. And they almost want to, like, I don't know, they don't want you to nitpick options. They want you to pick packages or something. I'm not a fan of Kia's, to say the least. But it seems like everyone else, you can almost instantly get on, figure out exactly what your vehicle is going to cost. And, talking about the shift, and how everybody's doing online stuff, General Motors' big push now is their, I know Chevy brands it, I think it's Chevy My Way. And
Yeah.
you can log on and take basically a virtual tour of a vehicle with an advisor that kind of walks you through it, and you can ask questions and you can ask to see this and that. And I know that's how I got into automotive reviewing videos. I started watching tons of automotive review content when I wanted the new Silverado, because let's see, when did they redo them? Uh, all the years are running together, but they had those row of buttons those toggle switches on the center console, and depending on what trim you got different options along that row of buttons, and sometimes you got blanks, and sometimes you got
Yeah.
what we affectionately refer to in our house as the fart button that rolls all four windows down at once, and uh,
I mean,
just
I get it.
all kinds of fun options there. But I was watching so many review videos because I really wanted one of those trucks, but I had to figure out what all those buttons were and what they would be on the version I wanted. And now Chevy basically does that in house, where I could log on, schedule a time with a an advisor, and I could ask, okay, show me a Trail Boss Silverado with the just show me the row of buttons, because not every car reviewer fixates on those row of toggle buttons. And so yeah.
But the minute the first guy does, now it's in the library.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
It's interesting the evolution of vehicle ordering and how that's happened. I was assisting with that in the 70s, and it was on paper,
oof.
and there were no option packages. I mean, everything was a free flow option, and you could have a really crazy combined vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, and then it wasn't until the late 90s that ordering went from mainframe
Yee.
ordering to actually being web based.
Yeah. I
And
can
this is
imagine that being yeah.
internally within GM. I'm not talking about for the consumer.
I can imagine that just being a big shift. I spent 11 years of my life doing analytics in the grocery store industry, and I came on board with that company right after they finished their, like, it was over a year, but a year plus project, going from one data management infrastructure to what I'm sure they still use to this day. I'll utter the letters SAP. Everyone in the enterprise industry knows SAP, and it's funny, I see billboards for them now. But just the big shift in that back end that no customers see, but definitely affects how businesses go to market. And I've always appreciated our friendship and our conversations, because you can give so much insight into what I, as a General Motors fan, didn't see during those rough years.
Yeah.
We've had many conversations online and off about why certain things came to be. And you know, if I were much into writing, I've done it, I've dabbled in it, but I feel like it'd be really fun to write a book over the evolution of GM through the mid to late 2000s to basically end up where we are now. And I don't know, a lot of interesting stuff has gone on there. My business mind
Well,
is just turning.
there's a good one that Bob Lutz wrote, and it pretty much takes General Motors through bankruptcy and just out of it because he came on in 2001 ish
Hmm.
as product guy, and he was being consulted by the CEO at the time, Rick Wagner, about GM's product portfolio, and he's like, "Where would I find a Bob Lutz that could help us out?" And Bob Lutz goes, "Let me come in."
Yeah.
And that's when he helped reshape the product portfolio, saw us through bankruptcy. He had some very strong opinions about how all that was handled. And I've got the book, and it's something about bean counters versus car guys or something like that. But that's a really good intuitive one. There's a couple of really good books out there. John Smith, who used to be general manager of Cadillac through the 90s, and he's got one. It's called like Fin Tales
Oh, okay.
that just came out, and I think I haven't read it, but I probably know a lot of the characters in it. But those are good books if you want to kind of see the behind the scenes because now they can tell that story.
Yeah, they're out of their agreements, and yes,
Well, their
I'm
pensions have been cashed in,
yes, no longer legally or financially bound to. Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh,
But that's what makes it such an interesting industry. There are so many decisions that are made sometimes for all the right reasons, and times it's hey, we can really eke out a profit by doubling down on this
yeah.
or any number of things. Obviously, bad engineered cars
Mm.
was not a great decision, but there were requirements to get X number of units out, and
It's a
sometimes
good
that's how you
short.
did it.
Yeah, it was a good short-term fix, but when it became like the go-to and got very little differentiation between brands, it's like, what are we even doing here? And eventually, the mainstream customer does figure it out, and you get the best value, and the other one goes by the wayside. So,
That's right. That's
very,
right.
we just spent time. I haven't put the video up, but I do believe as this episode goes live, it will be out. We spent time in a Buick Envision Avenir, which is a modern badge engineered vehicle. It shares components with the Equinox, the gas powered Equinox, and the GMC Terrain, but it really stands on its own on a lot of merits. And spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the video, was really well received in our household. And
Okay.
I can speak to this because uh, while we had it, I drove to an off road focused event where I was driving a lot of off road vehicles. Then I drove that lime green Toyota 4Runner home through Dallas and Fort Worth rush hour traffic. And then came home to immediately film my solo review of that. And it was so refreshing to get into a vehicle that was so smooth and so plush and so nice and didn't nosedive every time you stepped on the brakes.
Yeah.
and Buick is churning out some really good products. And well,
Yeah.
General
Yeah.
Motors is. And I I think we are in a very good time in the industry because the competition has gotten so fierce and nobody can rest on any sort of laurels like we're the biggest. Well, you aren't anymore. Or we do the most. Well, maybe you don't. It's just there have been so many paradigm shifts in the past 20 years that the status quo is no more.
Yeah. One of the things, and I agree with the Envision. I've not driven one, but I have certainly walked around it enough times and really marveled at the design of it.
Hmm.
And I've driven the original Envision, the,
Hmm.
the prior generation, and it was a nice vehicle. This one appears to be a lot nicer.
Hmm.
But so many vehicles, you know this because you see them all, the similarity in the profiles.
Hmm.
You know, how can you differentiate an SUV? How many different ways can you? It's either going to be blocky or it's going to be swoopy.
And
And
to that
how many
point,
variations can you do that with?
the other vehicle we had at the exact same time is the most similar looking vehicle on the market to the current Buick Envision. We had the Mazda CX-50, which, again, very similar proportions, low, wide, flat hood. Just a
Yeah.
very similar. Even had the fake vents in the same places. Like, could not have asked for it. It happened by happenstance. Like, I did not plan it, but I had them both in my driveway at the same time, and I was like, these are the two most similar looking vehicles. And naturally, they came up in the reviews of one another, or at least the Mazda came up in the Buick, because the Buick was reviewed after the fact. And they both serve their own purpose. Both are very nice and luxurious. But I will leave my review comments there and point
Yes.
you to YouTube or Facebook where those full videos are. But yes, there is so much. And it goes back to I'm still staring at this Toyota Tundra. Everybody claims that everything looks just like X. The new Mustang came out, and everybody's calling it a Camaro or a Challenger. A new truck comes out, and everybody claims it looks like X or Y. This new Tundra does. I don't know that anyone has compared it to anything else because it doesn't look like anything else, and it is refreshing when brands do that and they say, you know what, we're just gonna buck the trend. We're This is our design language now, and we're gonna go with it, and they absolutely stand out in the pack. May not be for the best of reasons at first, but I think the market has come around on Tundra styling, and it'll be interesting to see as other brands get a full refresh what next gen F 150 looks like, next gen Silverado looks like. I mean, we already know
Yeah.
what the Silverado EV is going for. So I don't know. Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, to your point about the Mustang, and I had the opportunity to go down to the Detroit Auto
Hmm.
Show during the normal show week, not
Right.
when you press types get to play around with it. But I did it during the middle of the day, so it was very lightly traveled.
Hmm.
And I stood at the new Mustang, and I could see where there was when you see pictures of that
Hmm.
vehicle is nothing like being next to the vehicle.
Right.
And yeah, I could see like that rear quarter window might have given you a little Camaro-esque look, but when you stand and look at the whole
Hmm.
car, you can start to see the body lines. There's no way I would confuse the two.
Right.
And they also had the current Mach 1 on the show floor, and so you could stand, look at one, and actually compare the 2.
See the changes.
And, you can see that there's a nice evolution of that design, and I won't call it revolutionary, but I will tell you, it's very close, Corey. When you
Hmm.
look at the changes in the sheet metal, it's a significant improvement in my eyes,
Yep.
and I'm not normally a Ford kinda guy, as you
Yep.
know.
Yep. Yep. So we had one. Yeah, we had the EcoBoost version with the bronze wheels on display for us. It was the first chance I wasn't able to make the Detroit show for air conditioning repair reasons here at the
I
homestead,
heard about that.
but they brought out an EcoBoost bronze wheel. I can't remember the package, some sort of package that gets you those options on the 24 Mustang, and it was up on its own little pedestal, glowing jewel box. And yes, I am a lifelong Camaro guy. Like, if it were not for Camaro, I this podcast wouldn't exist. Nothing Braindead GT would exist. And I can appreciate the design, the looks of it. I too see, and it is in that rear quarter area, a little bit the window, a little how that pillar dips into the trunk line. Yes, on paper, on 2D images, I can see the resemblance, and I can see why people online instantly go to that. But yes, you see it in person, and it's a different animal, huh? And there's a lot to appreciate, and the subtleties and the nuance. Another vehicle I can think of is the new Nissan Z. There's so much
Yeah.
in the design that if you're not there in person, you miss. And in a day and age where products are not getting onto the streets as quickly as even the manufacturers would like for reasons we've already covered on this episode, a lot of keyboard jockeys get on there and wage their heavy opinions, and that's what carries until people start seeing them on the streets and can actually vouch for themselves.
Yeah, that's a those keyboard warriors that
Yes.
there's I mean, that could be a topic for any number of sociological,
Yes. Yes.
classes. I mean, it's starting to eat its way into our car culture in a negative way. And,
Mm.
let's face it, you're on Facebook and you see a car driver might post an article and they're kind of seeking people's inputs. Always like, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even have to open the comments to know directionally where those comments go. It's like nobody can just appreciate a vehicle or something in life without being negative about it. It's like, why don't you go buy it and drive it and let's hear what you really think? And this is why I like the reviews like what you and Holly do, especially your family reviews, because it's so real world
Mm-hmm.
and you're not being critical over the fleck count in the paint or something. It's like this is why I especially love about Holly. She'll
Yeah.
go, "Which model is this?"
Yes.
And she doesn't care. It's like, "Does this work for me?"
Yep.
And that's what I love about those family reviews. And I've told you this a million times. And I think at some point Tucker's going to be giving you guidance from the back seat.
He already has, but trying to capture it on camera is difficult. But yeah, you're preaching to the choir on the keyboard warriors. Look no further than my, I think it's 15-second video showing off the front trunk of the F-150
Oh my
Lightning.
God, I saw that.
Like, it's still to this day, I am getting so much hate and personal attacks on me
Yes.
just because of the groceries we decided to load into it. Or, you know, It's amazing. I am convinced that I still need to do this. I am going to hook a GoPro facing out of the windshield and just drive around Tyler, Texas. I may make a time lapse of it and count how many light duty pickup trucks, so I'm talking 1500 model pickup trucks, are not actively towing something on the road. Because if you would believe the comment section on any lightning anything that I've posted, you would imagine that every pickup truck has a trailer hooked up to it at every moment in time. And that's just not the case, especially here in Texas. People use trucks for family vehicles. And the
Right.
Lightning is perfect for that because it is so comfortable, so smooth. It makes little to no concessions when it comes to you get all this size and no compromise on fueling the motivation of such a large vehicle. It blew my mind how cheap such a large vehicle was to motivate down the road. I get it, especially our model. I went on Ford's Build and Price, bringing it back to online Build and Price. The
Yeah.
2023 models took a price hike, as near as makes no difference, 100,000 for the spec that we drove. And I get it. That's not feasible to buy $100,000 vehicle because it is a third of what it costs to drive a gas powered version per mile. Does not make sense. But if you are already in the market for a luxury, smooth, quiet, comfortable vehicle, it is worth a look. That is all I want. And yeah, the comments, my goodness gracious. But
But however, it did help your algorithm.
yes, it did. Yes, it did. And has propelled us to a new level. Before we get too far away from it, so you mentioned Detroit. You saw the
Yeah.
Ford Mustang there. You and I have had some conversations not on the record. What were your thoughts on the show, having been there for many shows years past? Pandemic has changed how things operate. Many different brands, whether it be for logistics reasons, budgetary reasons, have opted not to do major auto shows as in years
Right.
past. What was your opinion on Detroit this year?
Well, one, I appreciated that it wasn't in January in Michigan because that's and I, worked down the street from the what used to be called Cobo Hall,
Hmm.
and it was very easy for me. We had this thing called the People Mover, which is an above ground monorail that goes through the
Yep.
Renaissance Center.
Hmm.
You go around a loop, and it went right into Cobo. So I never had to go. I could go without a jacket on, and it's January 6th, and it's 3 degrees above zero out. But I love the fact it wasn't that time of year. It was not well represented. You had the same show floor, which is immense in that
Hmm.
hall. But for the most part, you really just had the old Detroit big three, GM, Ford, and Stellantis.
Hmm.
You had some, I'm going to call them imports because that's how it felt like. It was an import focused show
Right.
that some dealers brought cars down to. So it felt more like a regional show, which I think Jimmy Dinsmore had mentioned
Hmm.
on one of
Hmm.
your, and he's spot on. Now, what I liked about it was you could actually get near the cars.
Right.
Years past, it was so packed, and there was so much money spent on display just for, I think, for the international press that you forgot that consumers like to shop for cars.
Yes.
And so what was beautiful about it, I was able to get into every car that was there, with the exception of a couple that were locked for
Right.
because they were early builds or whatever. So from that standpoint, I liked it. What I did notice, I went down there with another friend who's currently in the industry, and he was looking at things differently than I was. And I got distracted by what were the things that were really standouts here. And it was the number of vehicles with hood scoops.
Oh my goodness. Yes. And
So I wrote an article on it, which if you haven't seen, it's called
yes.
What's the Scoop? And I probably featured 20 vehicles that
Right.
had varying degrees of hood scoops on it, which it was a silly distraction for the
Hmm.
show, but it was fun. And I love hood scoops anyway, but it was interesting to see how many, mostly Ford and Stellantis products.
To that
But
end, at the latest showing that I went to in the State Fair of Texas, Ram unveiled to the public for the first time the 2500 HD Rebel, also with a hood scoop. Sadly, though, not functional. Like
Yeah.
that's the biggest offense to me. Like I get it. Like they look cool. They portray they portray a spirit of fun and adventure or speed, whatever the case may be, but don't put it on if it's fake, please. And then I've got Holly ringing in my mind because we had the Toyota Supra here, and I point blank asked her, like, that is perhaps the biggest offender of fake anything, fake vents, fake scoops, whatever the case may be. She could care less. She thought it
Yeah.
looked cool, and that's all that mattered. And so I'm like, okay, just get out of my own way. This is me being in the industry too much, caring a little too passionately about something that for the mainstream works just fine as is. So yeah.
Well, this is an occupational hazard that you now have,
Yes, it
because
is.
as you look at each vehicle, it's kind of your thing to have to be critical of these things.
Mhm.
I'm a car enthusiast at this point in my life. I love it. I don't care if it works or not. I just love the styling element of it. And that's why I got off on that tangent
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
taking a picture of every vehicle with any kind of a scoop. Even the Z06 Corvette has those massive
Mhm.
side.
Vince.
I think they're functional air intakes,
Yes.
but they're big,
Yes. Yeah. You talk about occupational hazard and getting stuck on things. For me here lately, my very odd signal of build quality and luxury is the sound windows make when you roll them down. Like, never in a
Hmm,
million years would I have imagined that being a barometer, but so far it has proven pretty true. And
interesting.
you roll the windows down on, okay, well, I'll bash my own cars here. My 2013 Chevy Cruze. One, it's an economy car. It was built to be cheap. Sticker on it was like right at 20. And you roll the windows down, and to me, it's that familiar sound because it just sounds like a normal window rolling down. You get in something even like that Buick Envision Avenir that we had with luxury upscale intentions. You push the window button, and there's a little less, oh, maybe grainy sound to it. It's a more smooth, plush. It definitely sounds more upscale. And the fact that I can't even articulate into words how much better these vehicles sound when you roll the windows down versus something more mainstream. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's one of those signals of quality to me that only in my current profession could I even bring up as here's something weird I've noticed, or even blinkers. Holly rolled her eyes very hard at me on this one. The noise that blinkers make, because it used to be a mechanical click, 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 click. And now a lot of manufacturers are getting away from this. I remember my first vehicle was a 91 Cadillac Eldorado, and it was a mechanical chime. Like, I'm pretty sure there was a weight hitting a metal
Yes.
bell somewhere in my Eldorado because it sounded different than anything else on the road at the time. And now you get all sorts of electronic noises. Polestar has perhaps the weirdest one I've sampled to date. And then, interesting, getting into the 100 plus thousand Mercedes S Class, it sounded so generic and so quote unquote cheap. I was like, what is this blinker doing in a Mercedes? And that's when Holly rolled her eyes and she's like, wow, you're really talking about blinker noises right now? I was like, it just comes with the job. I don't know how to. I'm sorry.
Well, and not to take your tangent farther than it needed to go, but I think you're aware that I had this '79 Z28
Mm-hmm.
way
Mm-hmm.
back when, and in 1980, Chevrolet put a functional air induction hood on it,
Mm-hmm.
and the flappers opened at the rear.
Mm-hmm.
They were solenoid activated with a switch that was off the gas pedal,
Okay.
and so I converted that car. I was able to get
Mm-hmm.
the air induction hood. And my dad was an engineer at the time at the GM Proving Ground, and he had a special plaque made that with a light. So when I wired it in, when the flappers opened, the light came on, like a warning light,
Mm-hmm.
and it said air and duct. And then there was a little switch that I could turn on and off the sound effects. And what I used was the there was the Cadillac chime at the time that
Mm.
if you had your door open, and it literally was like a doorbell go ding,
Mm-hmm.
ding, and it was a basically a clapper that was hitting
Mm-hmm.
that little sound bar.
Yeah.
And so when I found that car, rediscovered that car last year after 40 years, I was talking to the current owner of the car and I said, "Does it still have those Cadillac chimes?" He goes, "Oh no, I took that out. That was irritating."
Oh, that's a little disheartening. You and I have got to talk about the thrill because I ask all my guests when I do an interview, buying a car versus building a car.
Yeah.
You could buy something that's prepackaged that appeals to the masses, or you can take what you're really getting into, especially here in this stage of your life, and that's buying something a little cheaper out the door, but making it truly yours. I know
Yes.
what is the branding you have given your current Subaru Outback? Base
Oh,
Camp?
oh, let me see. I happen to have
Oh, there it is. Yes.
Base Camp. Yeah. Yeah. I was attracted to that brand because of the Outback Wilderness,
Mm-hmm.
especially the blue that it came in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go after that." And I had a really good sales consultant who did his job to find out if that was the right vehicle for me. He said, "Okay, so how are you gonna use it?" And I'm explaining, he goes, "No offense, but I don't really see you needing the wilderness package to go to Kroger."
Right. That's
So he talked me into the premium package, which is one step above the base.
mm.
He goes, "Why don't you just make it your own?" I'm like, "Oh, you're singing to me, baby." And sure enough, I did the wheels and tires.
Mhm.
I did a couple of other blackout treatments, and then I thought, well, I need to create. I love the badge, and I had to come up with a name for it,
Mm.
and everything else seemed to be taken.
Yes.
So, base camp.
I like it. I approve, and I've enjoyed watching the evolution of your Outback. And credit where credit is due. That is an excellent salesman, because so easy. I spent 4+ years in sales myself, and I was honest and upfront. I sold swimming pools. I would tell people, I really don't think you given everything you've shared with me about your life and where you're at, I don't think you want the maintenance of a swimming pool. But
Yep.
we're here for you if you follow through. And sure enough, they did. They
Well, would you
appreciated,
rather have a hot tub?
yes, they appreciated my candor and my honesty, and uh, basically said, we will go with it, and we will only come to you for service information and how to maintain it. So, it speaks volumes. So, really cool that, especially in modern era, that you've got sales associates that are willing to say, you would be happier in this. And have you considered that? And even basically talking you down. So, kudos.
Yeah. Yeah, I typically go in, I know what I want. I'm
Yeah.
gonna order it. And they would try.
Yeah.
That happened at Mini. They tried, and I'm like, "Oh no, I'm gonna get this." And then a year later, I was trading for something different that truly fit my needs.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Bill, you and I could go on for hours and hours and hours,
Yes.
but unfortunately, I'm looking over at the timer counting next to me on the soundboard, and we will have to save the rest of this discussion for a future episode. As always, we thank Bill Taylor, the Vehicle Nanny, for joining us. Head on over, check him out at vehiclenanny.com. Go buy some of his merch. He's got some really fun stuff. Do you still have
Oh,
the
yeah.
Respect Your Elders shirt on your site?
I do. I love that one.
So,
And coffee mugs too. So if you don't want a shirt,
yeah.
everything is available on a coffee mug.
Yeah, so you know his story if you followed this podcast for any length of time. His father was very instrumental, was basically the father of the K5 Blazer
Yeah.
as we know and love it. And so you pay homage to that with your Respect Your Elders shirt. And I need to get one of those on order. Perhaps that'll be my birthday gift to myself. So you'll be seeing one order come through this week, Bill. And you will see that in a future GT Garage Talk review on the channel as well. But Bill, anything else for our listeners before we sign off?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of my experiences. It's fun, as you can tell. This even at my advanced years, it never goes away. So I just appreciate you out there because you have a nice varied um, perspective on not only the industry but vehicles, and I appreciate that you're trying to show just that different angle that the rest of us don't see. And I applaud you for what you're doing. I think you've done a wonderful job, and this is why you've seen the growth that you did. So keep doing what you're doing, and I can only imagine where this will go.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. Who, who knows? I'm just chasing the views, chasing the comments, and we'll see how this evolves over time. But as
Great.
always, been a blast chatting with you today.
All right. Take care.
And so, with that, we bring another episode to a close. Again, always great talking with Bill. We had a long hit list of things we thought we could cover, might cover, may venture into the topic of that we only skimmed the surface of. We are working on a little more in-depth future episode. You'll have to go find us on Patreon to see a little bit more of what that looks like. Patreon.com/GT Garage Talk. I am making it my mission to get all of the aftermarket clips up, but at the $5 and up tier, you get access to just a little bit more conversation to each week's guest, each week's topic on a segment we call the aftermarket, and just have a little bit more conversation each week about whatever was covered on the main podcast episode or might tease at stuff for the future. So huge thanks to Bill for his willingness to jump on and talk with us this week. You can go check him out. Again, vehiclenanny.com and then gtgaragetalk.com for all that we do. Till next time, gearheads. Bye.